Hey everyone, and welcome to Wrestling with Regret. Now, last week I counted down the 8 worst things about WWE this past year. And since 50-50 booking's all the rage these days, I figured this week I'd go the other direction and give you my picks for the top 8 best things about WWE in 2018. Number 8. 205 revived. When the Cruiserweight division was revived in 2016, many fans hoped for the best but expected the worst. As I mentioned in my worst of countdown that year, when the Cruiserweights went to the Raw brand, it didn't do much to help their standing. 205 Live was booked as more or less of an afterthought as Neville ran roughshod through the roster with no end in sight and not much else shining creatively. Things reached a tipping point when Enzo Amore won the Cruiserweight Championship, which many fans saw as the ultimate insult. But then something happened that changed the course of the show forever. Enzo got fired. After Enzo's departure as champion, Triple H apparently took over the book for 205 Live, and things have made a drastic improvement since then. There are no more Cruiserweight exhibition matches on Raw anymore, but they're still being given plenty of chance to shine on 205 Live. Over time, guys like Buddy Murphy, Cedric Alexander, and Mustafa Ali have become flag bearers for the show and have added a level of stability and helped make 205 Live come into its own as one of the company's more entertaining weekly programs. Number 7. The B-Team. Every year it seems there's always some feel-good story regarding a lower-level talent that warms the cockles of my heart, and this year that designation goes to Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas. After being the Miz's stooges on Raw for most of 2017, the two were left on their own once the A-lister went back to SmackDown. They stayed together as a team and suddenly started winning matches, and kept winning and kept winning and kept winning until finally beating Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy to become the new Raw Tag Team Champions. Curtis and Bo did a great job honing their funny side as part of the Miz's entourage, so when they were left to their own devices, they were still comedy gold on the microphone while being entertaining in the ring. Them winning the championships was a very cathartic moment for many fans. And even though they've been dropped back down the card as of late and the Raw tag team scene in general is kind of a hot mess, there is solace in knowing that for a brief moment in 2018, the B&B team stood for best. Number 6. Ronda Rousey's rookie year. While Ronda's character needs some work as of late, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to like her compared to other more interesting female wrestlers, there's no denying that the Ronda Rousey experiment's done pretty well in year 1. The former UFC star famously debuted at the end of this year's Royal Rumble, pointing awkwardly to the WrestleMania sign to signify that she was coming to WWE to be a wrestler. When she had her debut match at WrestleMania with Kurt Angle against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, many people had their doubts, but their match ended up being one of the most entertaining things about the entire show. Then came her match at Money in the Bank against Nia Jax. That was a scarier proposition since neither woman's a ring general, but again, it turned out great, and best of all, nobody got hurt. Ronda reached her high point of the year when she won the Raw Women's title at SummerSlam, then followed it up with a main event match against Nikki Bella at Evolution, which was a fine match even if it did go a little long. Sometimes Ronda's promos leave a lot to be desired. Then there's the issue that she feels less special the more she sells for her opponents. But overall, Ronda's rookie year has played out very publicly on a grand stage and has mostly gone off without a hitch. Not a bad gamble by WWE. Number 5. Seth Rollins' 2018. When your top champion is gone for most of the year and everybody seems to hate the guy who's fighting him most of the time, at least fans have had someone they can look to for quality and consistency in 2018 in Seth Rollins. Rollins won the Intercontinental title at this year's WrestleMania in a great match and has since gone on to have, well, a lot of great matches. Dolph Ziggler, Finn Balor, Samoa Joe, The Miz, pretty much every week he's putting on bangers. Oh, and who can forget his incredible performance in that gauntlet match on Raw this past February when he went for more than an hour. Now to be fair, over on SmackDown, AJ Styles had a hell of a year in his own right, but to be honest, that show's doing pretty well with or without his presence. Meanwhile, Rollins' performances have been a shining, bright beacon of hope on a show that's been otherwise pretty disappointing this year. Seth Rollins had such a good year in terms of in-ring action and overall accomplishments, it'd be hard not to include him on this best of list. If it weren't for the contributions of Seth and his opponents, who knows how dreary Raw really could have been all this time. Number 4. Elias. Last year, Elias Samson arrived in WWE's main roster. The move up was a curious one. It wasn't during the Raw or SmackDown after Mania, and Elias didn't have the seemingly requisite run as NXT champion beforehand. But in short order, he soon became one of the biggest stars the fans loved to hate. Combining trash talk and exceptional guitar play, Elias's promos eventually got over with the crowd in a huge way. Though he may not possess the wrestling skills of a Ricky Steamboat, it became clear pretty quickly that he had the charisma to become a top star. A couple of months ago, the company came to the same realization many fans already did and turned Elias babyface. What made this face turn work so well was he didn't have to change a damn thing about his character, his in-ring work, or his promos. The progression felt natural and effortless, not forced like so many other face and heel turns often do. I know it's premature to compare Elias to somebody like The Rock, but when it comes to fan response and that transition from heel to face, that's who I keep thinking of. Now, whether he gets the opportunities that The Rock did, time will tell, but either way, the company has a potential huge star on their hands. Whether he's a face or a heel, Elias is consistently one of the most entertaining parts about Monday Night Raw, and we all know what WWE stands for. Number 3. Evolution. For the last couple of years now, WWE's been hammering this women's evolution thing into everybody's heads. And though it hasn't been perfect, it is nice to know the company's been making strides in building their female wrestlers up like competitors and not mere eye candy. And it's all been building up to the Evolution pay-per-view. Held in October in New York, the company's first all-women's pay-per-view was billed as a celebration of the past and present of women in WWE. The show saw Trish Stratus and Lita team up for the first time in years, an entertaining battle royal, the finals of the Mae Young Classic, and all-women's championships on the line. In the end, the high point of the show was the last woman standing match for the SmackDown Women's Championship between Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. The two beat the hell out of each other in this emotionally charged matchup, with Becky coming out on top. It's since been put on the short list of one of the best women's matches in company history. This show was way better than it had any right to be. The build going into it was flat out awful, as it was right between Hell in a Cell and Crown Jewel. For a time it seemed the company wanted the show to fail, but by and large it was a very entertaining event. Though WWE is far from the first company to hold an all-women's show, it is nice they finally got on the ball about it when such a thing would have been unheard of as little as 2 or 3 years ago. Here's hoping they're willing to do it again next year. Number 2. Daniel Bryan's return. In 2016, Daniel Bryan was forced to retire from in-ring competition due to his history of concussions. It seemed like that was that until March of this year, when he announced he was medically cleared to come back to the ring. Daniel's comeback started off hot at WrestleMania, then unfortunately languished for months with a forgettable feud with Big Cass. His feud with The Miz was fun to see, and even though he lost both of his encounters on pay-per-view, even in defeat, he still looked great. Then in one of the biggest shocks of the year, Daniel capped off his comeback tour the week before Survivor Series by beating AJ Styles for the WWE Championship and turning heel in the process. I didn't think one of those things would happen to Daniel again, much less both at the same time. And in the short time that Daniel's been a baddie, he's done some really interesting things with it. His character's transformed in a huge way that many of us would never have predicted, and it's already paying off in a huge way. Even if Bryan's return came later in the year, or even if he hadn't won the championship, I think his return would belong somewhere on this list, if only because of how good it feels to see him back in the ring where he belongs. Before I give you my top pick for the year, here's my non-WWE honorable mention. All In. In January of this year, Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks announced they were going to run a self-funded show that would fill a 10,000-seat arena. Many people laughed at the idea, especially in an era where indie shows rarely draw more than a tenth of that number, and when WWE is the undisputed king of running large-scale shows in America. Fast forward to September 1st in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, when more than 11,000 people packed the Sears Center for All In. After months of hype and announcements, the show became the nucleus for what was a weekend extravaganza, and the show itself more than exceeded the hype. We saw Jordynne Grace carry Brian Cage on her shoulders, Stephen Amell hang with Christopher Daniels, Jay Lethal bringing back Blight Machismo, Joey Janela almost killing himself on more than one occasion in a Chicago street fight, Joey Ryan being brought back from the dead surrounded by Dick Druids, Marty Scurll versus Okada, Kenny Omega versus Penta El Zero M, the Golden Elite versus Rey Mysterio, Flamita, and Bandito. This was an indie fan's dream. But the emotional highlight had to have been when Cody Rhodes beat Nick Aldis for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, capping off a great story of redemption for Rhodes and serving as the apex for the NWA's return to relevancy in the Billy Corgan era. More than anything, All In's success served as a landmark moment in the rise of independent wrestling here in America. It proved that WWE might be the biggest game in town, but is by no means the only one. It showed wrestlers there's life outside of the monopoly, and it put indie wrestling on a pedestal that hasn't been seen on that scale before or since. Cody and the Bucks went all in alright, and they and the fans came out winners. And the number one best thing about WWE in 2018 was Becky Lynch. After spending the first half of the year on the bubble of title contention, Becky Lynch had one of her biggest career moments ever when she turned heel on Charlotte after their title match at SummerSlam. Well, I say that she turned heel because that's what the storyline planned for, but it was obvious from the beginning the fans were not buying it. After fighting it for weeks, even going so far as to insert boos where cheers were in recap packages, WWE finally relented and turned Becky into more of a tweener. Between her promos, her work at Hell in a Cell and Evolution, and her ability to dunk on fools on Twitter, Lynch has suddenly become the most popular star, male or female, in WWE. Adopting this new attitude and calling herself the man, Becky's been able to generate a huge amount of attention in a few short months that no one else has been able to do in quite some time. She's reignited a fan base and has garnered some of the loudest reactions on either show. Whether it was the company's intention or not, Becky Lynch is suddenly a very big deal. The timing of her face injury, so close to Survivor Series, was a huge blow to her momentum, but the silver lining is it creates potential for something even bigger to come along at WrestleMania. We might even get the first female main event in the history of that show, not because of some hackneyed movement designed for good PR, but because what Becky Lynch is doing right now is genuinely the most interesting thing going on in WWE today. For taking the ball and running with it in a way that hasn't been seen before in the women's division, Becky Lynch is the best thing about WWE in 2018. What else do you think belongs in this best of list? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you in 2019.